Welcome back to Headz SA, where we bring you the latest in South African politics, straight to the point and fully unpacked. Today's video, we are diving into an explosive interview featuring the ATM's leader Vuyo Zungula on Face the Nation with Clement Manyathela. From the Phala Phala saga to ANC tactics and even tensions between the MK party and the EFF, there is a lot to unpack. Let's get straight to it. First, let's start with Zungula's take on the Phala Phala report. He reminded us of Parliament's duty to hold the executive accountable. According to Zungula, the ATM's motion to impeach President Cyril Ramaphosa was based on solid grounds. Why? Because an independent panel formed following due process found that the president had a case to answer. But here's a twist. Despite this, the National Assembly chose not to proceed with an inquiry, and Zungula calls this decision irrational.
The role of Parliament is guided by Section 42 and Section 55 of the Constitution when it comes to holding the executive accountable. This report, we do not have a case whereby the retired Constitutional Court judge out of nowhere decided to just wake up, write a report. It was because there was a motion which met the threshold in accordance to the rules, and he was acting on the instruction of Parliament. Now he comes with his with the independent panel, with working in line with the rules. He comes with a recommendation to say there is a case that the president must answer. Now, our view as the ATM is to say, if the report that he came up with was to say there's no case to answer, it would have been irrational for Parliament to say, let us institute an inquiry, because the report that is drafted by legal experts is not suggesting that. But a case whereby legal experts are suggesting that there's a case to answer, it is rational for Parliament not to hold an inquiry. And I think what Anton Katz actually pushed today was to stipulate that Parliament that day was not impeaching the president. It was voting whether to establish a committee that will have that will basically hold a trial where there can be oral evidence. They could consider bringing even that Hazim guy and everyone. But in the face of it, it was irrational then for Parliament to say there must be no scrutiny, because Section 42(3) of the Constitution mandates, obligates Parliament to scrutinize the actions of the president.
He argues that when legal experts produce a report, Parliament has a duty to respect it. Do you agree with him? Let us know in the comments below. Now, let's talk about the South African Reserve Bank's role in this saga. Recently, the South African Reserve Bank cleared President Ramaphosa of any wrongdoing. But rewind to a year ago, and Governor Lesetja Kganyago admitted that the so-called not perfected transaction, a term he first learned during this investigation, was central to the findings.
It's not quite how we communicate. There was a lot of legalese in there, and that's because the lawyers said it must be this way, because it's when something like whatever you say is going to be used against you. What has now eventually happened, because we have been taken to court, it would enable us to table the full report, including the steps that had been taken in the investigation and the documentation that we used in the investigation. And we think that this ventilation in court will actually put the matter to rest.
That's actually quite interesting to hear, Governor. You say that, and I guess, are you saying in hindsight that you thought that you would have done the communication slightly differently?
I would have preferred to do the communication better, because the way in which even as in this interview, I don't like using big terms, but lawyers love their terms, and they wanted the statement in a particular wording.
Well, I think we've all learned the term perfected transaction now, that's for sure.
I didn't know about it until we had to deal with this investigation.
When it came time for Parliament to vote on the Phala Phala report, Zungula claims the ANC used its majority to shut it down. He pointed to alleged comments from Deputy President Paul Mashatile, who reportedly warned ANC members that they would face disciplinary action if they voted against the party line. This, Zungula says, is a blatant abuse of power.
What the ANC is trying now to confuse people is to act as if the decision by the National Assembly back then was basically a reviewal of the report. In our view, we are arguing that MPs, sometimes they do not even have matric they do not have the capacity and the legal grounding to actually overturn a report that has been drafted by legal experts.
Yeah.
Judgments on the UDM issue, whereby the question was, when confronted where there's a conflict between party interest as well as the country's interest, what must an MP do? The Constitutional Court affirmed that the MPs must always act or vote in line with their conscience and in line with their oath of office. Now, on the day, you remember Minister Mantashe, there was those allegations that they were threatening members of the ANC. Even on the day, there was an MP, Thandima Mbehlala, who, when she was seeing that the recording of a vote was not in line with the party directive, she stood up and said, please correct my vote to reflect the directions of the party, not the oath of office, not her conscience, but the directive of the party.
Clement Manyathela challenged to Zungula, asking if ATM members would have done the same, voted with their party rather than rationally. But Zungula stood firm, emphasizing that ATM respects the rule of law and decisions based on justice, not loyalty.
And Parliament will argue that, well, we are very much entitled to act in the manner that we acted. This was a constitutional process, whether the ANC abuses its majority or not. That's still part of our parliamentary democracy. So what do you say to that? Because whether you like it or not, if it goes back to Parliament, who says the GNU members of Parliament are not going to abuse their majority and still choose not to vote in favor of the report?
We have a constitutional democracy in our country. And all actions, either of the executive or parliament, must be consistent with the constitution. So that is the bone of contention here, to say, when parliament conducts its business, is it consistent with what is obligated or mandated by the constitution? In a case whereby parliament rightfully takes a decision that is not in violation of the constitution, because we differ politically in terms of our views, we can't go to the courts. But in a case whereby parliament takes a decision, in our view, that is a violation of the constitution, then the Constitutional Court, because we live in a constitutional democracy, is the one that needs to adjudicate. Because we can't have a parliament that is going to undermine the constitution. The parliament has to operate within the framework of adhering to the prescripts of the constitution.
I'm telling you now, if your MPs tomorrow went and voted against the position that the ATM has taken, you're going to take disciplinary action against them. Otherwise, they're free-flowing, they've got carte blanche to do whatever they want. And that's what's also problematic about our electoral system.
Now, here is where it gets really interesting. Zungula also touched on the brewing tensions between the MK party and the EFF, which he says are worrying for the Progressive Caucus. Both parties have influential leaders and a shared vision for change. So why the conflict? Unity is critical, Zungula explained, not just for these two parties, but for the broader progressive movement. But does that mean ATM is ready to dissolve and join MK party's vision for a united political force? Zungula says no. According to him, unity can be achieved without collapsing individual parties. What do you think? Is a united progressive force the answer to South Africa's challenges? Or is diversity in political voices more important?
He was just reiterating what Mamun Nqakula was saying. It's not a matter of us picking up something in the air. It was just a matter of he was just repeating what Mamun Nqakula was saying.
So I want to ask you before we wrap up on the Progressive Caucus, because today was a display of what happens when parties come together. Will you work together as the so-called black parties in parliament like initially planned? Because we've seen that sort of disintegrate. There are some parties that have since left to join the GNU. You see the fight happening or conflict between the the EFF and the MK party. Is there still hope for the unity of all the smaller parties?
Unity is what we need. We can't move the country forward without unity. The past 30 years has clearly shown us that instead of being fragmented as progressive in our country, we need to find a way to unite, to work together. If we're truly serious and intentional and genuine about our intentions of transforming the country and improving the material conditions of our people, there is no other option, there's no other way. There needs to be unity.
Are you happy though to lose the identity of your party as the ATM?
There is no party that's going to lose its identity. Currently, we are in the Progressive Caucus. We've got 5 parties there maintaining their different identities. But when matters arise that require us to work together, work together.
The President Jacob Zuma's grand plan is to unite all the parties under one banner and ultimately, from what he says, is then take over the ANC. Seemingly, then all of you are then under the African National Congress, and then you hopefully get enough votes and you get into government. Would you want to be part of that as the ATM? Are you prepared to be part of this amalgamation of parties where you're going to be under one name, whether it's the MK party or it's the ANC?
Look, like I stated, unity is paramount. However, the unity that we're thinking about as the ATM does not really require the dissolution of the different political parties. There's many modalities that we can work on that would maintain the identity of the different political parties, but still find a way to work together. It is currently happening now in the Progressive Caucus, whereby there is no party in the Progressive Caucus that has outright said, we want to dissolve in favor of Party A or Party B, or one party saying, we want you other parties to dissolve and come to us. There is no such discussions. However, when issues come in Parliament, we've got forums whereby we discuss and we agree. And there are issues whereby we don't necessarily agree on everything, because it is human nature as the parties won't agree on anything. But from a principle point of view, all parties in the Progressive Caucus, we are coexisting well in Parliament. Whenever there's a need to work as a one Progressive Caucus bloc, we do that. Whenever there's a need to work in our different formations as a party, we do that. So in answering your questions, there's so many modalities that we can work on to achieve the objective of unity without the dissolution of the different parties.
The interview raised some major questions about our political landscape. Is Parliament failing its duty to hold the executive accountable? Are our democratic institutions being manipulated? And will the progressive forces in South Africa find common ground or continue to fight among themselves? We want to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss on an update. Thanks for tuning in to Heads Up SA. Until next time, stay informed, stay empowered, and keep your heads up, SA.